Good afternoon, everyone. We may have a few more people joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started because it's right at 12 o'clock. So welcome to the Roundtable program, Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. I'm Mary Elizabeth Fukai, and I serve as Assistant Director of the Women's Philanthropy Board. And this is the first of two programs in which we're partnering with the Carey Center's Youth Programs Division, which is led by Lauren. For those of you who are not familiar, the Philanthropy Board and the Carey Center Youth Programs are both part of the Carey Center for the Advancement of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Studies, which is housed in the College of Human Sciences at Auburn University. What? Program, we're excited to feature Dr. Portia Johnson as she shares with us the importance of having money conversations with children, strategies for children ages 1 to 8, and tools and resources for you to use. Dr. Johnson is an assistant professor and extension specialist with a joint appointment with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System and the Department of Consumer and Design Sciences in the College of Human Sciences at Auburn University. Originally from Atlanta, she earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's in business administration from Arizona State University and a PhD in financial planning, housing, and consumer economics, also from the University of Georgia. Dr. Johnson's academic and research agenda includes household financial literacy, career preparedness, and sustainable home ownership. In her free time, she enjoys theatrical and visual arts, volunteering in communities, and traveling. Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. I thank you all for being here today, and I'm excited to have this conversation. We're going to talk about children and money, having conversations with them, courageous conversations. And as Mary Elizabeth suggested, I work at Auburn University, and my role here as an extension specialist is to provide financial resource management and workforce development curriculum that agents extend throughout communities across the state. And I see several of our agents here today on the call. So thank you for joining us. So today I want to review some of the things that I'm going to discuss. We're going to address first the elephant in the room, anxiety and money, because oftentimes when we talk about money, there is some level of anxiety. We're going to discuss, here we go. We're going to discuss financial literacy, what that term is and how we gain financial literacy through education, why literacy even matters, and why it matters in younger years. I want to walk you through the way that I address this topic of financial literacy is through something I call money milestones. And then I'm going to give you some tools to work through those milestones with your children. We'll finish today with some questions and some comments. So as we start today, if you have questions that kind of come to your mind throughout the session, please feel free to put those things in the chat box. Or if you don't feel comfortable sharing your question in the chat box, because as we discussed, oftentimes money is an elephant in the room and we have some anxiety around it, you can send a text to my work cell and that's on the screen as well. So as you have questions as we go through, please feel free to share them there and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of today's session. So now that I've invited you to ask me questions, I want to ask you all a question. How anxious are you about different money topics? And so if you can, if you have your cell phone, I invite you to take your cell phone out and scan this QR code so that we can kind of talk through some of these questions. If you are online or you have access to the internet, aside from this presentation, you can also go to menti.com. And when the screen comes up, you can put in this code and it will allow you to access this survey or these questions. And so I see some people starting to access the survey. I'll give us some more time here on this QR code.
It is also in the chat box if you need to copy and paste it into the internet.
Thank you, Lauren. And so I see responses coming in on the screen. And once you access the code on menti.com, this is the screen that you should be seeing. On a scale from 1 to 5, how anxious are you to do these different activities that involve your money? And I'll give us about another minute, and then we'll discuss some of these things. Does anyone need any more time? Great, I think I see a few more responses coming in. Okay, so on average, it seems that people are most anxious talking to a bill collector or a debtor, which isn't surprising. Whenever I see a piece of mail from the IRS, I get really anxious myself. And the next thing that people are really nervous about is talking to a financial counselor or seeking out that counsel from an advisor. Completely understandable. I am not going to tempt the technology gods by sharing this screen now, but if we have some time during question and answer, I'll bring up all of the results and share them on the screen. So money and anxiety kind of go hand in hand. It's always really understandable to be nervous about our money. It's a limited resource. We don't have infinite amounts of it. And so making those decisions around our money can be really stressful to us, and it can create some discomfort. So it makes sense that talking to children about money isn't something we're all really jumping to do. And we do it for a number of reasons. We avoid conversations with our children. And sometimes we do it because we're anxious about our own money situation. We aren't comfortable with the way we are handling our money. We aren't comfortable with the amount of money that we have. And so we don't feel that it's a conversation we should engage our children with because it's discomforting to us. Or we think that our children just simply don't understand that concept of money yet. Maybe we think that they're too young, or maybe we want to shield them from what we call adult conversations, or that's not a place that a child should be in. Maybe our parents didn't have conversations about money with us. And so we're very nervous to have those conversations with our children because we don't know where to start. And lastly, we think that we don't have enough money to make it worthwhile to talk about money. Sometimes we think that only people who inherited a lot of money or who come from families that have intergenerational wealth, that those are the people that should talk about money. And none of those things are entirely true. They're myths about how we handle money. It doesn't matter whether we have a small household budget or a large one, whether we're making decisions about buying this versus that, or whether we're talking about estate planning and passing down wealth. Both of those families have reasons to talk to their children about how money is being handled. In talking to our children at young ages helps us to do a few things really well with our children. For example, because money is an intimate conversation, it helps us bond better with our children. It gives us opportunity to build some quality time talking about something that impacts them now and that will impact them in the future. It helps us communicate better, And because money is intimate, it helps us build trust. It teaches our children to set goals, and that's a life skill set. So it's beneficial to them, whether they're setting a goal for a school project or whether they're setting a goal for retirement later in life. Goal setting is a lifelong skill. And us talking about money not only helps our children understand money, but when we're teaching something, we're learning it better ourselves. So it's helping us to break down our stigmas and our anxiety simply by having the conversations. And so in my world, when we're talking about this concept of money, we're very often talking about a concept that we refer to as financial literacy and an associated concept called financial education. And at the very base of this is the word literacy. Literacy simply means to have knowledge of something and then to use that knowledge to do something. So in financial literacy, simply what we're talking about is having knowledge about finances and using that knowledge to increase your financial well-being or your financial outcomes. And some of those outcomes might be how you manage your finances in your home, how you budget, how you use your credit cards, how you compare loans, or how you shop insurance. All of those are financial topics that fall under financial literacy. And we gain literacy, or we become more literate through education, the process of education. So for us to become more financially literate, we become educated about finances and financial products. And the outcome of us doing that helps us to, one, make better choices, make more informed decisions, the decisions that are right for us in our particular household or our situation. It helps us avoid making a poor decision, falling into a money scam, for example, or making a poor choice that impacts our lives long-term. And it helps improve our outcomes over time. So all of those words really come down to a few simple concepts. We all have money behaviors, and those behaviors are impacted by what we know. Our very technical skills, things we call core skills, like what do we know about APRs? Do we know about inflation? Do we understand supply and demand? Those are core skills. But all of those core skills are built on very simple foundational skills like adding, numeracy, learning comparison, shapes comparison. This shape is small or this shape is large. And then that entire process is influenced about the way we think about money. What's our psychology? Are we afraid of money conversations? Do we get nervous when we have to add or when we have to explore mathematics? All of those things are impacted on our behaviors. So when we talk to children about money, we want them to understand those two circles on the outside, their foundational skills and the way they think about money. And as parents, those are the two places that are foundational and where we can help our children develop a good relationship to money by focusing on building their foundational skills and focusing on helping them have good attitudes and good psychology around money. So those are the two areas that we're going to talk about today, money mindsets and foundational skills. And so why is this even important to children at such a young age? Well, what we know about financial literacy through research is that people who have higher levels of financial literacy, who know a lot about finances, they have better outcomes with their money, no brainer. So they are less likely to have foreclosures. They're less likely to have extreme borrowing behaviors, to have extreme debt. They're less likely to be stressed about their money. And particularly, we know that what we understand about finances at the age of 18 has a lot of impact on the behaviors we have for the rest of our lives. So research shows that at the age of 18, if parents have done a good job, or institutions like schools have done a good job of making children financially literate, those children, when they get to the age of 25, they have more assets accumulated, they have higher net worths, and they make better decisions about how they spend their money. So teaching children about money before the age of 18 becomes critically important to their outcomes in life. And children are already interacting with money and financial resources even before they get 18. Almost 30% of children are using credit cards. They're using your credit cards for purchases. 6% of them actually have a credit card in their own name. And of that 6%, 20% of them are using that credit card without any oversight. Of course, they have a credit limit, and their parents are likely paying the bills at the end of the month, but those children aren't receiving a lot of insight or oversight on how to be responsible about that. And because so many children have cell phones, they're interacting with products they're being marketed to, so they're making consumption decisions. So it's vitally important to teach them about finances because they're already making choices on their own about how to spend their money. And they have money to spend. So 50% of children, they have a job. Most of them work in the summertime, but some of them work year round. And children are spending on their own, on average, $9,000 a year. They're filing taxes, and they're already concerned about money. They already have attitudes about money. They have attitudes about their credit score. They're already anxious about their future debt. So since they're already thinking about these things, it's important as parents to start talking to them about these things as well. And it's never too early to start having conversations with children. Even as young as the ages 1 and 3, you can talk to children about money. And we can talk about money in any area of our life because typically money is touching every area of our lives. So for example, if we were watching stocks on the television, we can have a conversation about stocks with our children if they're 6 or if they're 16. The level of conversation might change. The wording of the conversation might change. The information that you provide would change depending on their age, but you could still have a conversation on that exact same topic of stocks, whether they were 6 or whether they're 16. So for example, at the age of 6, our conversation might look something like, I'm watching these stocks on the TV. This is a stock. A stock is me investing in it now or me buying it now, hoping that I get more money later in the future. At 16, that conversation would be far more complex. You could talk about stock tickers and stock market prices and buy prices and when to get out of the market. You can include more things in that conversation because your child is more advanced in their skills. And this information and these discussions, they don't always have to be formal conversations. They can just be conversations in the car. They can be very informal. Children learn about money by watching us interact with money. So giving them opportunities to do that helps them to become more comfortable with money. For example, if you're going to the bank to make a bank deposit, take your child with you. Instead of leaving them in the car, take them inside. Tell them what you're doing. Show them the bank deposit slip. Explain the process of what's happening. That's a very informal way to help children become comfortable with money and with institutions, with banking institutions. A recent survey showed that 17% of 18-year-olds had never walked in a bank. They had never gone to the bank. And so when they become 18 and older and they have to interact with banks, they're nervous about institutions because they didn't have that exposure. So that's a very simple, informal way to introduce your children to financial products. And then our learning or our teaching can be very formalized as well. They get a lot of this in school through field trips and things of that nature, but we know with schools cutting funding in a lot of areas that a lot of these field trips aren't happening anymore. So there is an opportunity for us as parents to provide these experiences, these formal experiences for our children. And some of them might include introducing them to some simulated games. And I'm going to share some of those with you here in a moment. Or creating a bank account for them and teaching them how to manage that bank account. That's a formal process. Taking them to the Federal Reserve so they can learn about money is another process. And so I want to walk you through some very practical ways at each age to talk to your children about money. I call these money milestones. They are age-appropriate things and activities to discuss with your children as they build on those foundational skills that we talked about, and as they develop healthy mindsets or psychology to money. So today, we're going to walk through just the first three. We're going to start at the toddlers and move through the early middle years. We're going to talk about both personal skills and technical skills. Personal skills are soft skills, and technical skills are hard mathematic or processes. And so some of those technical skills in early years might be numeracy, counting, learning to count, learning numbers, learning to compare objects. And then in later years, they'd be more advanced technical skills like understanding inflation, learning about interest rates, understanding credit and credit scores. And early in life, the personal skills or the softer skills that we should focus on teaching children are those very simple concepts like learning how to self-regulate themselves, building strong memory, learning how to persist and have patience. And then later in life, those skills that build on those more foundational skills or advanced skills like having tenacity in the face of obstacles, or having the ability to execute something from beginning to completion, and prioritizing goals. So today, as I said, we're going to focus on the first three, and I'm going to give you some very practical tools to start practicing these with your children. So toddlers ages 1 to 3, although they're young, they are sponges, as I'm sure you know. And the technical skills that we like to focus on at these ages that help them build better financial skills in the future are the concept of delayed gratification, waiting, foregoing an option now at the hopes of getting something greater or bigger in the future. Numeracy, simply learning your numbers, learning to count, and then learning how to compare objects. Smaller objects versus bigger objects, different shapes. And that skill of comparison later in life, it turns into learning how to compare things like different loans, different mortgage options or vehicles, and things of that nature. So this fundamental skill of simply learning how to make small comparisons, it builds in the future to them making more complex comparisons. And then on the softer side, when we do these things, we help our children learn the ability to memorize, which will become vitally important to them as they enter school and they have higher levels of education that they have to commit to memory. Teaching them how to focus now so that they can focus later on education, and then teaching them how to self-regulate themselves. So some games that might be useful to teach these different qualities and skill sets to your young children is the waiting game. This game became quite popular recently with TikTok, and it is a reiteration of a science experiment that was done in the 70s, a controversial science experiment wherein they gave children a marshmallow, and they gave them the option to eat one marshmallow now or wait amount of time and then get multiple marshmallows later. The concept though of the waiting game should be around giving your child an option and not judging them for their option. So giving them the option to have one cookie now or wait a few minutes, wait an age appropriate amount of time and get a greater amount of cookies later. And what this is teaching your children to do is to have delayed gratification, to understand that they can give themselves the option to enjoy their money now, or for instance, save money and have the ability to enjoy it in retirement. So what this simple tool is teaching them how to do is to have patience and to delay gratification, that is a choice. When playing this game, you don't really want to force your children into a choice or lead them into a choice or judge them for the choice that they make. So for example, if a child says, I'll take my cookie now, I'll eat my cookie now, give them their cookies, celebrate their choice, but also tell them that next time, maybe if you wait, you could have more cookies. And so this just helps them build that practice of waiting and learning the benefits of waiting for things. Another simple game that we can play, because we want children to recognize money, to understand what money is, and also to build this concept of numeracy, is that they can start counting coins. So you can start, for example, with the penny. Give them a number of pennies that's appropriate to their age. So if your child can count to 5, give them 5 pennies, because we don't want to give them far too many and frustrate them, because we don't want to start associating frustration or anxiety with money early in life. So make it simple for them, make it fun. So if you start with the penny, tell them this is a penny, and then allow them to count the number of pennies. Once they've mastered recognizing a penny, move on to other coins. For example, a dime. This is a dime. Let them count dimes. And so that's teaching them, that's helping them with the practice of knowing numbers and recognizing money. At the ages 3 to 5, when they become preschoolers, we want to build on those skills. So they're going to continue learning numbers, learning to count to higher numbers, so we can continue the coin counting game, giving them more coins. And also, if they've been practicing memorizing or knowing different coins like a penny, a dime, a nickel, a quarter, now they should be able to start practicing comparison. And so, for example, you can put all the coins into a pile and ask them to pick out the penny, or ask them to pick out the quarter. And that's an advancement of the skills that they were building when they were 1 to 3. Another thing that we want to teach children is about consumption, about the difference in the need and a want. And there are 2 really good ways to do that in your everyday life. Practicing trade-offs. So giving your children, again, an option, similar to before when we talked about the waiting game. We're teaching children how to make options or how to make choices and feel confident about their choices. So giving them the option, for example, at the grocery store, to either have this toy or that toy. And helps them understand that, 1, we don't always have the ability to buy everything we want. And sometimes we have to make trade-offs and consumptions. And then also associating the word no more often, and not just the word no, because children are hearing the word no since they are very small, 1 year old. For instance, if they're going to touch something that's bad for them when we say no. And so they have started to associate the word no very early on with something negative. And we want to change that negative connotation into this idea of self-regulation and delayed gratification. So instead of just no, practicing the words not now or next time. So for example, if you're at the store and your child wants a toy and you would normally say no, tell them not now, or we can get it next time. And so that helps them, even if you have the money today and you could have bought it today, if you tell them next time, that helps them further understand this concept of delayed gratification. It helps them further understand the concept of patience, of having patience with money and with the things that they want. And it also enforces this idea of persistence, because one thing's for sure, when you tell your child next time, they're going to remember, and they're going to make sure, they're going to be persistent in asking you for that item the next time that you're in the grocery store. And so the last age group that I want to discuss with you today are the middle ages, 6th through 8th grade. And anyone who has a teenager or an adult child knows that you don't want to go back to the middle ages. They can be a tough time to parent, but that's because children are gaining a lot of independence in their middle years. They're learning personal skills that are going to be vital for them when they become adults, and that are vital for their financial management skills. Skills like multitasking, thinking for themselves, having critical thinking ability. So that's why they're testing their independence, because they're building these critical thinking skills. They're thinking about future orientation. What would I do if I were the parent? What would I do if I were an adult? They're thinking about resource management. They're taking ownership of their own identities, their own clothing choices, the resources that they have. They're learning how to manage those things themselves. And so sometimes that give and take can be frictional, but empowering those choices at this age will help them build confidence again about money. And that's really the goal. No matter the age, whether they're 1 or whether they're 18, we want them to feel confident about money, that they're going to confidently be able to manage it when it's time for them to do it on their own. And so the technical skills that are important at this age is management, responsibility. And if they don't have a routine yet, empowering them to have routines, particularly when it comes to their money. Yes, when it comes to their day, or when it comes to their extracurricular activities, but particularly with their money. And giving them the opportunity to not just make a choice between consumptions, but actually make purchases themselves, to empower them to save, empower them to buy things. And so a few ways that we can put that into practice is, one, to give allowance, to begin giving allowances at this age, because children 1 through 5, they've learned about money. They now know what money is because we've been doing all these other money activities. So now we're giving them ownership or responsibility of money by providing allowance. Now, there's a lot of literature around how to provide allowance, when to provide allowance, when your child is ready for an allowance. We don't have a great deal of time to go into the science of allowances. Suffice it to say that some people believe that it should be tied to chores, and some people believe that it should not be tied to a chores. But that's a personal decision. And so I encourage you to look at the pros and cons of how to give allowances if that's something you choose to do with your children. But it's a really strong financial tool and money management tool that children can learn early in life. Another opportunity, as we talked about before, is to allow your children to start being involved to the degree that they're watching or shadowing you on different financial decisions that you're making. So for example, at your monthly money management meeting with yourself or with your spouse, and I call it a money management meeting. It's that time you sit down, once a month to talk about your finances, to talk about the budget, to talk about the bills, to talk about saving for the future. I do this money management meeting with myself, by myself, at the beginning of every month at the coffee table. So allowing your children to sit in on just a portion of that meeting, and so they can understand the decisions that are being made about money and how money is managed and why it's managed. Allowing them, as I talked about before, to go with you when you go to the bank, or letting them watch you as you balance your checkbook, if anybody still balances a checkbook anymore. Or if we're not balancing a checkbook or we aren't actually writing checks anymore, to allow them to watch you set up a bill pay on your online bill payment account, to set up a new payer or to pay a bill, one morning, to allow them to watch you as you do those things so that they understand that it's a responsibility that all of us adults have. And when they're an adult, it'll be their responsibility. And so there's no need to be anxious about money. Or, for example, to allow them to write out a withdrawal slip or a deposit slip for you. Things like that, those shadowing things. Another one that I'm particularly fond of is to plan dinners with your children. And we call this the dinner challenge. And just the process of planning a meal from start to finish, deciding what you're going to cook, setting a budget on the items that you're going to buy, taking that trip to the grocery store and making consumption decisions between different brands and different price points, staying within that shopping budget that you created for that meal. And then when you get those items home, the science of the counting, of following a recipe, enforcing numbers, this numeracy concept that they're still practicing from younger years. Things like counting, measuring, cutting, all of those things are numerical. And then, of course, they associate a positive experience because they get to enjoy the food that they just made. So this is, again, building confidence in children around managing a budget, shopping for and consuming items, learning numbers and fractions and cutting through the recipes, and then enjoyment. Some other informal ways, as we talked about before, are board games or playing games with your children. And so children can learn about money through board games that you buy them. I don't know how popular board games are, but I know as a child, I always got board games for Christmas. And I know a lot of children are spending more time on digital applications, but reintroducing board games into the household is a really good way for children to learn tangible money skills. So these are just a few. There are a lot of board games that help build children's financial literacy, even if that wasn't really the intent of the game by the companies that developed the game. But these games in particular are around money. And so I think that they are very good ones to introduce to young children at this age. There are games that are very beneficial for older children, and we'll talk about those in the next series. Games like the Game of Life, for example, are beneficial to understand money concepts and financial concepts at older ages. But for young children, money bags, the game of allowance, and this game of exact change are really useful for financial literacy. And then there are a lot of resources. If you did a simple Google on financial management or financial literacy games online, you get a lot of resources. These are just a few resources that I think are very trusted sites. And one is the US Mint. They have a suite of games teaching children, young children, about money, what money is, how to spend money. The FDIC has a website, How Smart Are You About Money? And it's a virtual game that walks children through making those decisions. One of my favorites is Treasury Direct Kids. They have a suite of games as well. And then many of the financial institutions like credit card companies, i.e. Visa, they have websites designed at building money skills as well. And so I want to ask you one more question before we go into questions that you may have for me. of the tools that we just discussed, which ones do you think you might be inclined to try with your children? Once again, you can go to menti.com and put in the code to engage in this question, or you can scan the QR code again here.
Dr. Johnson, I'm sorry to jump in, but your Menti quiz is still showing the previous question.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. There was a request to go back to this screen.
And I've put these websites in the chat. So if you would like to copy these links, you can do so. And I'm about to type in all of the board games that she provided.
Thanks, Lauren. I see that there's a lot of interest in giving allowance and board games and practicing the not now, next time. Very well. I'll leave that one up as we move on. And are there any questions or comments that people might have about money and children?
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Tanisha had a question first. Sorry. Go ahead, Tanisha.
It's okay, you can go
Your
ahead.
hand. Okay. So hi, this is Oslin Rodriguez. Hi, Dr. Johnson.
Oh.
So my question is, I've tried to do allowance before, and then I haven't been very consistent. I have a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And one thought was, okay, do you give $12 to the 12-year-old, $8 to the 8-year-old? What are some tips about figuring out the right? I don't want to say the right amount or a range, or how do you figure out what's a good amount based on their age, for them to be able to manage an allowance?
Yeah, I think you're, thanks for the question, Aslan. I think you're on the right track. A lot of people do follow that approach of giving $1 per age. And then some people do a multiple of it. For example, they might do up to 5 times the age. So, depending on what your resources are in your household, what your financial resources are, what's a comfortable amount for you to put into your budget to allow for your children as you provide the allowance, and how often you're going to provide the allowance. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So my suggestion would be to, before providing the allowance, look at your own personal budget and decide how much money each month would be, one, motivation for your children to stick to it, and also two, comfortable for you to give them on a consistent basis, because consistency in allowance, providing allowance really is key. So if you can, for example, give a 5-year-old $5 every week comfortably, then that is the amount that you should go with. If it's only comfortable to give a 5-year-old $5 every 2 weeks, then that's the amount you should go with and the frequency that you should go with. So in short, I'd say what's comfortable for your budget, and then two, what's motivating to the child. Because if they don't deem the amount as motivating, they may not stick with the practice of balancing that allowance or being responsible in how they use the allowance. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And my kids are all listening right now. They're all saying they want multiples.
Of course they do.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tanisha, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then I'll read some of the questions from the chat box.
Sure. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your presentation. I have a soon-to-be 13-year-old and a 7-year-old who are also present during your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to them for sitting in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was mandatory. My question actually is, how do I encourage a behavior of saving and a practice of saving? So our children receive allowance. Our allowances are tied to chores, and it's once a week, and doing extras around the house. But you know, it seems to go out faster than it goes into their piggy banks, and they all have piggy banks that they can see and count their own money. So we try to keep them responsible for their own, but saving seems to be difficult.
I think that's a very good question. I think it's a common challenge, is to encourage the savings. Earlier in the presentation, one of the facts was that 40% of children have zero savings, even though they work. So it's very common. So thanks for the question, first of all. But one way that we go about encouraging savings is to tie savings to a goal. So to couple the lesson of saving money with saving for a particular goal. To setting a SMART goal or setting a short-term financial goal, allowing them to set a short-term financial goal, a mid-range financial goal, and then a long-term financial goal, so that they know that as they're saving money, it's for a particular reason. And when they reach that short-term milestone, they have given themselves the reward of saving. And when they reach that longer milestone, that long-term milestone, they've given themselves a larger reward of saving. So my first tip would be to always, when you talk about saving with your children, always do the practice of setting goals together and making those goals SMART goals as well.
Thank you. I also was just told by the soon-to-be 13-year-old that apparently we need to give allowances on the spot. So thanks for that.
I agree with that.
Okay, one of the questions was, could you talk a little bit more about whether you should tie allowance to chores?
Yep, that's a good question. So there are different camps, and I think that there is no right or wrong approach. I'll say that first. There's no right or wrong way to give allowance. But the people who tie it to chores, the benefit of tying it to a chore is that it allows your children to understand that money is earned, that you get money for doing something. And so later in life, it reinforces the concept of working hard of making good or sound career choices, optimal career choices, and also of focusing on goals. So that's the benefit of tying money to a chore. For those parents who don't tie money to chores, some of the benefit for them of not tying money to chores is, let's say you have a child that isn't really motivated by having extra money. They feel like generally the parent provides them everything they want and or need. So then those children don't really feel an internal incentive or agency to do the chore to get the money, because they don't at that age place a high value on money. So it really just depends on what your child is motivated by. If you have a child that you know is motivated by money, if they're really excited about the concept of having their own money or being able to spend their own money on things that they want, then tying the chores might be a good choice for you and your child. But if you have a child that's not really motivated by money yet, or motivated by the idea of ownership, then tying that to a chore is not a good idea for that child. But still providing allowance to that child can be beneficial, because even without tying it to this sense of responsibility, i.e. a chore, they can still begin the practice of managing money simply by having it given to them. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That was a great question. And then our last question, there are still a few minutes. So if you have any other questions that you would like to put in the chat box, feel free, and I will read the last question. And it is, what is going on in the public school curriculum for financial education for young students?
That's a great question. I'm so happy. Lauren, you're shaking your head. We talked about this a few weeks ago. It's a great question. I'm happy someone asked it. So in the state of Alabama in particular, Alabama is one of just 5 states that created curriculum in the schools that require students to learn financial literacy concepts. Only 5 states have done it, and Alabama is one of them. Now, with that being said, that requirement for financial literacy is placed in high school age children. So in Alabama, 9th graders receive financial literacy standards, meaning concepts, in the 9th grade, often through a class called Career Exploration. And then they receive additional standards in 11th or 12th grade on concepts that are more economic in nature, like inflation, risk aversion, amortization, things of that nature. There are not currently any requirements in any grades younger than that for financial literacy. And so there is a push. So to answer your question, nothing in younger years in school is happening specifically on standards of financial literacy. Of course, they are learning those foundational skills we talked about. So they're learning memory, they're learning counting, they're learning numbers, they're learning comparisons. But beyond that, there is no requirement in the school or no standard in their curriculum that says that children before grade 9 will learn anything about financial literacy. And that's why these conversations are more and more important in the home, because they are not conversations that they're going to get in school. Even though we know that if children don't master these things by age 18, they're likely to have less than optimal money outcomes.
Thank you. We have one more question. What are your thoughts about children's accounts / programs provided by the financial services community?
Great question. And I was anticipating it. So I have a slide about it. There are, and what I think you're referring to are some of the commercials that come on TV around financial services for kids, bank accounts for children. The one I see most often in the news and on online on sponsored accounts is this green light banking card or money management card for children. I say do your own research about the financial services that are provided. I think that, like we saw before, most children, at least half children, have their own cell phones. And so there is an opportunity to provide that education, that financial literacy that they're not getting in schools, to provide that at home or to provide it on the cell phone that they are already using all the time. But we want to make sure that it's at an age appropriate level and that we're still providing some oversight and some direction on those accounts. So if as a parent, you're going to be fully engaged in how your child manages this bank account or manages this investing account, for example, I think it's a wonderful tool. But if a parent is not investing the time to provide that oversight, children can really fall into a lot of those pitfalls and those, I'll just call them scams to get them in the debt market, in the credit market, in the loan market sooner than we would like them to be there. So it is a tool that's useful. These accounts are a useful tool, but they require a lot of diligence on the part of the parent to make sure the child isn't falling into these marketing scams. And so on my screen now are some of the items that are currently in the market for you to consider. This is not an endorsement of any of these products, but they are out there. And I say, do some comparison shopping. If you're going to do them, do some background work on looking at them. Some of them come with fees. Some of them don't have fees. My one suggestion would be to use reputable and sources that are backed by the FDIC, if possible, banks that are backed by the FDIC, not those that are not, and to provide a lot of oversight for what your children are doing online.
Are there any more questions or thoughts, comments? Sure. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Johnson, for sharing all of these wonderful practical tools for us to teach money smart skills at each specific milestone. I would also like to thank all of you for joining us today for the first part of the Money Doesn't Grow on Trees roundtable. Dr. Johnson, you have provided a great conversation starters, teaching strategies, and tools and resources for us to use with our children. I'm looking forward to learning more in the next session. And the next Money Doesn't Grow on Trees Part 2 will be held via Zoom on December 9th at 12 p.m. And we will be getting all this information that she has shared, and I can email it out if you are interested. So if you want to put in the chat that you're interested in receiving some of this information that she has shared regarding the different programs, financial programs, or the websites or the board games, if you'll put it in the chat box, we'll make sure that you get that email and that information.
Also, I'm going to interject too. This is recorded, this whole session, and we are going to put it up on our Women's Philanthropy Board YouTube channel. So if you have anybody who wasn't able to make it, or you want to go back and watch it all again to refresh your memory, you can go to YouTube and just search for the Women's Philanthropy Board, and you can find it on our channel. All right. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. I also want to comment. I saw that Oslin her husband had taken a picture of everyone sitting around watching and shared it on Facebook. So if you and your children are watching this program and would like to share the picture with us, please send it our way. We would love to have it. And I want to thank you all again for joining us for our first ever collaboration between the Women's Philanthropy Board and the Carey Center Youth Programs. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. We enjoyed it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great presentation. Okay, thank you.
You did great, Dr. J. Somebody wants their allowance.